In this demo, we'll take a look at the new Istio Ambient Mesh data plane, which is a sidecarless approach to deploying Istio and allows you to opt in to various capabilities gradually by splitting the layer 4 mesh from the capabilities that provide layer 7. Layer 4 really is a tunneling technology that is much closer to the CNI, while layer 7 is a full-blown Envoy proxy that is deployed one per app or per identity type and can implement all of the capabilities of layer 7 like retries and header-based routing and so forth. In this demo, we're going to take a look at a couple of scenarios. The first is when applications need to communicate with each other but don't need layer 7 capabilities. And this is a way that a lot of people start off with the service mesh. They just want to enable mutual TLS and layer 4 control network policies between the applications. And in Istio Ambient Mesh, the way this is implemented is with the Z tunnels. Z tunnels are agents that live on each of the nodes and direct the traffic to the appropriate destinations. And in doing so, it creates an HTTP overlay network that we can use to implement mutual TLS between the applications. So let's take a look at what that looks like. To do that, we're going to start by installing Istio. Actually, if you come here and look at our cluster, we don't have Istio system, and we have a handful of applications here, very simple sample applications that I'll use to demonstrate this capability. So the sleep service here, if I exec into it, I can call hello world and get a response from one of the services. And in this case, I see load balancing between V1 and V2. I can call a specific version if I want, and I can call the other version as well. But what we want to do is we want to install Istio, and we want to implement service mesh capabilities without having to deploy a sidecar. So let's come over here. We will run Istio install, and we will run it using Istio-ctl, and we'll set the profile to ambient. So let's take a moment and we'll install this. This will install some familiar components like the Istio-D control plane, and I believe it installs the ingress gateways as well. But then we'll see some of the new components, the Z tunnel that I mentioned. If I come back here and we look on the bottom pane, we see Istio system has been installed as a namespace. If I click into that namespace, we see some components that run as a CNI plugin on the node. We see the Istio-D control plane, and we see the Z tunnel agents that are deployed as a daemon set, one per node. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add our applications in the default namespace to this ambient mesh. So what we're going to do is label the default namespace with ambient mode or data plane mode equal to ambient. And now that will automatically add the workloads that are in the default namespace, these services, to the ambient mesh. But notice there are no sidecars. In fact, these applications have been running for a while, so we didn't have to restart them or inject anything into them, change their descriptors or anything. But if we come into the sleep application, which we see is running on the ambient worker node, and we exec into it, and we come back down here to this pane, we find the Z tunnel that's running on the ambient worker node, and maybe we watch its logs. We'll watch it full screen. And if we now do our curl hello world, then what we should see is traffic is now going through this Z tunnel. And if you look a little bit closer at the logs, we can see things like, well, it's trying to do some mutual TLS, or it's invoking Spiffy and establishing mutual TLS. Now let's take a closer look at when we make those calls through the Z tunnel. What does that actually look like? We're going to do kubectl debug in the Istio system namespace around this Z tunnel. We'll use netshoot image pull. And we're going to look at termshark on the default device. And let's come back here and let's make a call. Let's make a couple calls just to capture some traffic between sleep and hello world. And we'll stop that. We have enough traffic now. And actually just come back up a little farther up. We should see that when traffic's going through, that here we see traffic getting to the Z tunnel, and then when it gets there, we have TLS encryption. All right, so the traffic going over the Z tunnels, we get mutual TLS between sleep and hello world service. And as a reminder, we didn't inject any sidecars. We don't have any restarts of the application. What we've done is in ambient mode, we've been able to include these workloads and the communication between them as part of the service mesh. Now, a big part of the service mesh is also enabling layer 7 capabilities. And so that's where the waypoint proxy, or the layer 7 capabilities of the ambient mesh, come into the picture. So instead of the traffic passing between these tunnels, we can actually pass them and hand them off to a layer 7 envoy proxy, which then implements certain capabilities like retries, fault injection, header-based manipulations, and so on. In this demo, we are going to deploy a waypoint proxy, and we are going to inject a layer 7 policy, fault injection in this case, and then we'll observe how we can implement layer 7 capabilities in the service mesh, again in ambient mode without sidecars. So to do this, let's get out of termshark here. Let's get out of this. We are going to apply a waypoint proxy, which is, let's take a look at it, which is the layer 7 proxy for the hello world services. So one thing you'll notice is we don't try to share layer 7 components between different identities. We want to keep those separate. And we can create this waypoint proxy by applying this waypoint, and then we should see a new proxy comes up, which then would enable us to write layer 7 policies about traffic going to the hello world service. So now if I come back, we can take a look at a virtual service, which is a familiar API in Istio that specifies traffic rules when I try to, when a client tries to talk to hello world. And in this case, we'll do some layer 7 matching, and then we'll do some fault injection. In this case, 100% of the time, we will delay the calls by 5 seconds. So let's apply this virtual service, and then come back to our client. And now when I call hello world service, we should see a delay of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we should see that potentially load balance across V1 and V2. So you can see we get layer 7 capabilities. We get layer 4 capabilities and mutual TLS. And we can write policies about the communication between these services. and we haven't touched the applications. We can include them and even exclude them dynamically. So if we're done with the service mesh and we don't want it anymore, then what we can do is just uninstall it and remove the Istio system namespace, and then come back to our applications. We see they're not touched. Go into one of the applications if I need, and traffic continues to flow as though there was nothing there before. So thanks for stopping by. Go check out the Istio Ambient Mesh, and please provide us feedback. Thanks.